All right, good morning. So today is CT5 from half term 7, all about problem solving. So it's combining lots of different skills all together to do the kind of thing that you might have to write for maybe a question 4, 5 or 6. Hopefully you've had lots of practice using input and print. We want to be familiar with different arithmetic operators so that we can solve some maths problems. We want to import different libraries in Python and then use either string formatting or round to display the right result. So it builds on what we did last time in CT4. We want a program that's as easy to use as possible. So to do that, well, I don't think it makes it easy to use, but it's just another example of an extra module. We're going to import time and put sleep in there. We want a menu so that the user of the program can say, I want to calculate the area of a triangle or the area of a circle or the surface area of a cube or the volume of a cube, any of those. So we want to be able to potentially calculate all of these things. So how do we do that? Well, I've given you the code from the final point of CT4. You've got that on here. Let's see what this does first of all. Right, well, we have some sub-programs. I'll pause when you give the answers, but can you tell me, are these procedures or functions? Yeah, good. So these are all functions because they return a value. Notice that Edexcel likes the return value to be in brackets. You don't actually need to do that, but the mark scheme sometimes requires it. So we're going to do the silly Edexcel way of doing things. What does that mean? The double asterisk. So yeah, the double asterisk means raising to the power, so it's p side squared. What actually is p side? How would you describe it? Yeah, good. So where was it? P side is a parameter, and a parameter is something that you can use to customize how a subprogram works. And it stores the argument, and the argument is the value that you pass in. So when you call area of a square, the argument is 33 1/3. That value is going to get stored in the parameter. And remember, a parameter is like a local variable. So what is a local variable? Well, let's start with a variable. A variable is the name of a value that can change when the program runs. But if it's local, it only exists within a certain village or town or city. No, that's silly. It only exists within the scope of a subprogram, a procedure or a function. So if that's the code that we've got, we need the user to choose a calculation from a menu. Validation required. What does that mean? Well, let's go back to our PowerPoint. That doesn't really give us much help, does it? Well, let's think about this together. I want to ask the user what they want. I could do something down in the main program, please choose an option, but we're trying to do things using procedures and functions. We do this a lot in question 4 and question 5 in the on-screen test. So let's decompose the problem. Let's say I want to show the menu, and the menu will give us an answer back. That can be the return value. Obviously, Python doesn't know how to do menu until we tell it how to, so let's define it. Let's say a definition of menu is going to be the following. Something like, please choose an option. Well, what are we going to do? We want to have the area of these shapes. So let's give people an option. Calculate the area of a square. Copy and paste. Notice I'm pressing home to go to the beginning of the line, end to go to the end of the line, shift end or shift home to do your selection, and control C and control V. We want to be fast and efficient. Calculate the area. This time I'm pressing control and the arrows. That means I can select a whole word at a time. And it's not just control and arrow, it's control shift and arrow. So I can select them all at once. It's much faster than using a mouse. The area of a rectangle. End, enter, home. There we go. Option number 3, area of a triangle. And I'm not going to put circle in, you can do that yourself. We can see the options. However, it says validation required. Well, you can only validate an input. We haven't got an input yet. So let's get an input. We've now got an input. Nice. But there's no validation, and it doesn't do anything with it. I want it to keep asking until we get options 1, 2, 3, or 4, because you've got 4 to choose from. What type of validation could we do? Well, a presence check, if you remember, checks to see if there's anything in there at all. I could do if choice is equal to nothing, then display something. Hang on, you didn't put anything in. Or I could do if choice is not equal to nothing, then I could return it. But I don't just want a presence check. What other validation types are there? Video. So we could do a length check. We could say if the length of choice, now we own, I'm not doing this very well, am I? If the length of choice is equal to 1, because we only want one character in, then that's likely to be more valid, isn't it? But I want to keep going until it's valid. So there's a lot of different ways of doing this. I'm going to do valid is false. We haven't got a valid input yet. And I'm going to keep going whilst valid is equal to false. Or a nicer way of doing that is saying while not valid. I think that's more English. And you know what? I could do, please choose an option, Control X. I could put that in here. So let's see. If I put nothing in, it fails the length check because the length of what I type in is 0. If I put a long thing in, it fails the length check and it asks me again. But if I put in a single letter, at this point I want it to pass the length check, but it doesn't. Why not? How can we fix that? Yeah, we haven't actually updated this Boolean flag. What on earth does that mean? Boolean means true or false, and flag just means you're putting the flag in the air or you're not putting the flag in the air, as in it is valid or it's not valid. So down here we can say if the length of choice is equal to 1, then valid is true. What does that mean? Well, invalid, length 0, invalid, length lots, valid, length 1. But not very helpful because it's not the best choice of validation yet, is it? I don't think a length check is the best type here. Any other suggestions on what types of validation we could do? We've had a presence check and a length check. Are you aware of any others? We can have a lookup check. We can say, is the value in a list of acceptable options? So we could make that as a function ourselves, or we could just do a nice easy way. We could say if choice is in a list of the string 1, the string 2, or the string 3, or the string 4. That's a really nice way of doing validation. Not is equal to 1, just is what the user typed in this list. And let's see, we failed the presence check. We would have passed the length check, but we failed the lookup check. Both of those are in the list, but not joined together. That's a valid number, but it's not in the list. That is in the list, so it passes our lookup check. A really useful skill to be able to do a lookup check. How does this work? Well, we've got iteration. It keeps looping while valid is false, or while we're not valid. What is it that repeats? Everything that's indented. We give them a prompt. We ask for user input. We check if that user input is in this list. Nice. There's one thing missing that is preventing this from being a useful function. At the moment, it's a procedure and it's not very useful. What's missing? Yeah, good. So this doesn't return a value yet. Now it does. But is that in the right place? I suppose it kind of is. I think that would work. Because it would only return the choice if it's valid. Or, if we wanted, we could put that outside of the while loop. So after it's finished asking, only then does it return. But they're kind of functionally equivalent. Let's see. Invalid, invalid, invalid. Oh no, it was valid. Even though there's not an option here, it was in my list. So we're not far off now. All you need to do is get that back and say, if the choice is 1, do that. If the choice is 2, do that. But we also kind of want to let the user type in the measurements. There's no validation here. You trust that they put in sensible values. We also want some thinking time. I think that's pretty pointless, really. And we also want some string formatting. We'll come back to that a little bit later. I'm going to give you a little bit of time to try and do this first. I'll leave my code up on the screen, pause the video, define a menu, call the menu, and do if, elif, elif, else to determine which of these you're going to call, and ask the user what the values are for the arguments so that you can pass those in. We'll come back to this in 5 or 10 minutes. Let's remind ourselves what happens. Hopefully you've got an option 4 on here that says please calculate the area of something else. So if I go for option 1 for the area of a square, I don't want to show all of these. I only want to show the stuff for a square. So let's see. If, now where are we saving the return value of menu? We're storing that in choice. If choice is equal to, remember the 2 equals is 1, then, and only then, do we want to do these bits. Do our calculation and display our result. Elif, choice is equal to 2, etc. I'm going to put all of these in here. I don't want you to do that. I want you to have an elif choice is equal to 3, elif choice is equal to 4, etc. But at the moment, I choose 1. Well, it's nice because it does something square related. However, I want it to ask the radius. No, not the radius. You don't have a radius of a square. The length of the square. At the moment, it's always 33.3. Well, that's not right. We ask the question. Please enter the length of a side for the square. Be as detailed and as easy to use as you can. I know it's a square because it's only going to run if you say 1 and option 1 is to do with a square. Yours might be in a different order. However, if I choose square and say 10, I'm expecting the area to be 10 times 10, which is 100. But it still says it's 1111. I'm going to pause the video and we'll discuss why. So we had to make a variable to store the answer to the input, as in input is a function, a built-in function to Python, not a user-defined function. The function returns a value, we want to store that value, and then we want to use it, we want to pass it in as the argument. It's almost going to work, but not quite, because if we say that the length of the side is 10, we're probably going to get a runtime error, because we can't raise something to a power if it's a string. What's happened here and how do we fix it? Line 33. We can't raise p sides to the power 2. We can't square something if it's a str. How do we fix it? Yeah, so length is a string. Why is it a string? Because the return value from input is always a string. We could either do that here and we could say int, or we could do it here. Doesn't really matter, but think about it. You probably don't want int. Why not? I mean, it's going to work because you can do 10 and we'll get 100, but why is that probably not what we want? Yeah, we might want a decimal, so let's see, 1. Let's say 10.5, and at this point, we can't convert 10.5 to an integer. What is 10.5 if it's not an integer? What could we convert it to instead? Yeah, we can convert it to a float instead. Here we go, let's try. 10.5. Excellent. So the only bits we haven't done yet from our instructions are pausing for thinking time. Pointless, but if the question asks us to do it, it's not pointless. I suppose we should do it. And then some string formatting. Again, I'm going to leave you some time to do that. But your job, make sure you've got all 4 options in here. Make sure you've got all 4 options down here, if, else, or if, elif. Make sure you're asking your questions, storing your answers at the right data type, storing it into a sensibly named variable, passing that variable in as an argument so that you can receive it as a parameter, use it in your subprogram, return the value, store the return value, display the return value. So let's go through what we were asked to do. Does our program yet allow the user to choose a shape calculation from a menu? Validation required. Well, yes, it does, because we can choose. You type in something invalid, it asks us again. How does it do that? Using iteration and a Boolean flag to keep repeating until it passes a condition. That's our condition. So that's the first success criteria. Ask the user the relevant measurements. No validation required. So mine does that for a square, but it doesn't do, it doesn't do that for a rectangle yet. Hopefully yours will. There's no validation here, as in if you type something in and it crashes, that's okay. However, mine does not yet pause for thinking time. So, how can we pause for thinking time? Let's avoid the why should we, because I don't think we should. We're going to import time. Wouldn't that be wonderful as a Year 11 student to just import time? I'd love that as a teacher, to import time. Everyone could do with a bit more time in their life. Where do we want thinking time? Well, probably after we've entered this. Let's do time.something. What's the keyboard shortcut on the PLS to be able to find whatever you want, whatever you're looking for? What is it? Control F. I'm going to search for sleep. And there it is, time.sleep. I always get confused whether it's in milliseconds or seconds. So it looks like it's in seconds. The angular brackets here are not things you need to type in. That's just saying it's describing the argument that you pass in. Right, so let's try it. Time.sleep 1. I know it's irritating, but we'll do it anyway because we've been asked to. Enter the length of a side, 5. If we're going to sleep, we should probably say, let me think about that. Please don't ever do this in your programs. It's so annoying. Let's try again. Boom. Nice. Okay, so we've done that. What we haven't yet done is the string formatting. Why is that an issue? Because let's say I want it to be exactly 2 decimal places. And ours at the moment is, well, let's see, 1, 10. This is 1 decimal place. What if I want 2 decimal places? How do we do that? Anyone remember? Well, let's go back to this and search for formatting, for string formatting. And Edexcel always makes a variable called layout. It doesn't need to be called layout, but why break the pattern? Let's go for it. Layout equals something. Be careful, because this has been copied and pasted from Word, and that's a special fancy quotation mark that will not work. Can you see that is different to a Python quotation mark? So be careful if you copy and paste from the PLS. What does it say? Something in angular brackets. No, not angular brackets, moustache brackets, curly braces. How do we round to a certain number of decimal places? Well, colon, the number of spaces, full stop, the number of decimal places, F for float. So let's just try dot to F, and then this time the area of the square is, and then we can do layout.format and then pass in the value that is replaced with that. So what is that? Answer. Ooh, if you can spell answer, that probably helps. Will it work? Let's see. 10, and it should say it. Oh dear. What have I done wrong? Oh, there's a character I've missed. That's what I should have done. I've missed off 2 of those characters. One I'm allowed to miss off and the other I'm not. Can you spot it? What have I missed off here? So this character here, we don't need. That says that your value should be center aligned. This character says that your value should be right aligned. And if you want it to be left aligned, it's that one. So you don't actually need them. It's not that we're missing. Which other character are we missing? Yeah, we're missing the colon. Let's see if it works. So 10. I don't want irritating thinking time. There we go. We've got 2 decimal places. If you put in 7 there, I don't know whether we'd notice the difference. Let's see. You probably wouldn't, unless you said put it right aligned, or you put a full stop on the end. Thanks. Let's see. 1, 10. And now, can you see that that is now 7 characters right aligned? Or it's going to be 7 characters center aligned or left aligned. Don't really need that on the end. It was just to prove that if it's right aligned, you'd have something after it. I don't want 7, and I don't want to say the alignment. I just want 2 decimal places. I think that is what I want. Let's see. Great. So your job, please, make sure that you've got some of that irritating sleeping time, thinking time. Make sure that you've got 4 options in your menu rather than my 3. Make sure that each of them asks individually for the shape, and that we're using string formatting to format to 2 decimal places. If you've zoned out for the last couple of minutes, zone in now, please. Question 4, 5 and 6, you get marks for readability and decomposition. What does that mean? It means you have to use procedures and functions. It also means you should use white space and commenting. You get up to 3 marks for your code conventions. So the easiest marks in paper 2, put in some white space to break it up into paragraphs. Put in at least 1 comment and describe what's happening. User chooses a rectangle. Dead easy. No coding skill involved at all other than knowing how to write a comment. But for questions 4, 5 and 6, you should always add comments. Sometimes the question asks you to put comments, but the question almost always says you should make your code as easy to read as possible. And that's what it means. White space and comments. The extension today is to extend it to have more than just the area of a 2D shape. You could do this with option 1, 2, 3, 4 on your menu, option 5, 6 and 7 to calculate the volume of these. Or you could structure it differently. You could say, what shape first? Square, rectangle, circle, triangle, cube, cylinder, sphere, pyramid. And then once you've chosen one, you can say, do you want to work out the area, the volume, or the surface area? I don't really mind. You decide. And then once you have finished, you need to save your Word document, making sure that you've got a screenshot of your code in there. Save your Word document, close your Word document, and upload your Word document into Half Term 7, Algorithms and Programming 7. We've still got 15 minutes left of the lesson, so don't do that yet. But just for the purpose of the video, that's where we'll upload when you've finished.